Business is simple. It's just not easy. We focus on 3 things to help you run and grow your business more easily: talent, sales, and how to scale. This is the Talent, Sales, and Scale Show. Hey everyone, this is Brian Whittington with this episode of the Talent, Sales, and Scale Show. Today we have all about branding. We're going to be talking about how we can take your brand and build the trifecta, whatever in the world that means. But we have Kate DiLeo on with us. She is the founding partner, I guess the founder of Kate DiLeo Branding. And she's a mentor to 16 million different startup and incubator type organizations, helping out a number of different startups throughout the world. So it should be pretty cool. And watch out for here in July 2022, so probably around the time that this is dropping, she's going to be dropping her new book, Muting the Microphone or the Megaphone. So muting the megaphone, how to stand out in this craziness. So all that to say, welcome to the show, Kate.
Thanks so much for having me, Brian. It's great to be here.
Yeah, I really appreciate it. Now, one of the things that we always start with, right, is the question of, so you're a mentor to a billion different people. And so you've been running your own branding shop since 2011. But why in the world should we listen to you?
Well, why should you? Well, honestly, at this stage of the game, I'm 36. It's 2022. And I have actually helped almost 300 organizations worldwide build brands that are the path of least resistance to revenue. My whole career has really evolved into being in a place where I can help entrepreneurs and founders come up with that messaging that's going to get more of the right prospect to the right table at the right time. And so that's why I'm here today, is to hopefully share with you guys, what's that proven formula? How do we actually build a brand that wins more work?
All right. Now, there's a couple of things that will come out of this. One part, I find it good to level set and define terms. So if we can define 3 different distinctives, the difference between branding versus messaging versus positioning, because a lot of times people will take positioning and messaging, or excuse me, positioning and branding and mix them together. So why don't we start there? Can you help us understand, what do you find the differences between positioning and positioning and branding, please?
Okay, so at a high level, let's just talk about the fact that I think branding, well, let's be honest, branding is a very nebulous, fluffy word, isn't it? I think when anybody hears this, they're like, what are you talking about? Okay. And branding also gets mixed up with marketing. Okay. So when we think about the world of sales and marketing is the way to build your revenue engine for a company. All right. Branding is a slice of the pie in marketing, where what we're really trying to nail down is how you show up in the world and who you're speaking to. Now, the way that typically happens are, there's 2 sides of branding. You have what's called like the visual side of branding, which many of us are familiar with, right? Your logo, your colors, your font, visually, how do you show up? But then you've got this messaging side of branding. And that's my work, is the messaging side of branding. Branding is about messaging, Brian. And that is also equal to positioning. Said differently, branding is really about the message that directly speaks to your customers to position your products and services. And it speaks to, here's what we do, here's how we solve your heart pain, and here's how we're different than the rest. That is brand messaging.
Got it. Now, let me make sure that I got this then. So branding is really just a segment of marketing. So marketing can be, and I didn't realize this, I mean, marketing has 17 million different flavors, right? So PR, digital, content creation.
Gosh, it's crazy.
Okay, so really then branding is a subset of marketing, a specific part of that. And if I heard you right, you said messaging is really positioning?
Mm-hmm. Yes,
okay.
It is.
Now, how much is positioning, branding, or let's take it to that messaging and branding. I'm screwing up on my terms here today. Son of a gun, Katie, is Monday. Taking a look at position and messaging. So those 2 things, positioning and messaging. How much of that is that ICP and go to market, that ideal customer profile and go to market, versus just the message to send to that ICP and the personas within?
Oh my gosh, that is such a great question. Well, let's talk through this. So, okay. When we think about building a brand, just in general, you say, hey, Kate, we have this company. Here's our products and services. We're in the business of building our business. Okay, great. All right. So that's all established. You have customers that you want to reach, right? You have target audiences. When you build your brand, the front face that somebody experiences the moment that they interact with you, the promise of what you're going to deliver, who you go after is critically important. You must put stakes in the ground and decide who are the 1 or 2 or 3 audiences that you want to serve. I think Brian, one of the biggest things that can get companies in trouble is trying to speak to everybody.
Which speaks to no one then.
Bingo. The thing is that we are not in the business of convincing. We are in the business of converting. I want to speak in sales language for a second because I have a sales background and that's my passion is sales. I'm not actually really a marketer by trade, even though I did it for years. I really look at brand through the lens of sales. When we think about how do you get more people to buy, well, ultimately, you have to make a decision of who are the best audiences that have the highest probability of purchasing. And if we make that choice, we get to decide that we do not need everybody to purchase from us. We just need to do a really good job of speaking a message that's going to talk to the heart pain we solve for a few groups. And if we do that, we will see more buyers from those groups and our market share goes up and our revenue goes up.
Well, I'm pleased to hear that you're saying that branding is really sales conversions, or branding is
yes.
right, because my belief, right, and this is where I'm going to ask you to change my belief, please, is I look at branding as Coca-Cola, Pepsi, that have more money than they know what to do with. And it's all about, everybody thinks of that brand, but that's never going to be the small to mid-sized business. Even a lot of the enterprise businesses, there's very few that are going to have enough name recognition that's going to say, oh yeah, I trust them. I know it's going to be a, fill in the blank name. There's very few of those. So how does branding work in an organization that doesn't have a brand name recognition, that will never be the number one, that maybe their exit is to get acquired through a strategic purchase or something like that? So can you speak to that person? How should they go about branding?
Absolutely. Well, first off, if we say that brand is really the promise that you put into the world, right? It's the promise, it's the stamp of what I should hope to experience when I interact with you, your products and your services, right? So first off, it's so funny because whenever people ask me, well, Kate, how come, Nike can get away with having a tagline like just do it? And it doesn't even answer the question what we do. It doesn't even say much. And I go, great, here's the answer. What's their marketing budget?
Right.
No, I mean, seriously, if you think about most business in the world, the 99% that don't fall into these categories, these multinational, huge corporations, and we really ask, what's the purpose of brand? Well, if brand is really all about promise, what that means is it's the message that in the experience that somebody should have, even when you show up in a Zoom room, when you're at a chamber of commerce. What do you say? You walk into a room of 100 people, what comes out of your mouth? What do you say that gets people that you're shaking hands with, that gets people at the other side of the table, the people that come to your website to actually go, now that's interesting. I want to have a conversation with you. That is what we need to be thinking about with our brand. What are we saying and to whom that clearly articulates what somebody needs to know to take a next step with us? And it's actually very simple. That is where that brand trifecta concept comes in.
So that's interesting. So in my vernacular, in the sales vernacular, what you just said is what's their elevator pitch, their 30-second commercial, and then what's their value prop? How do they differentiate yourself? Or I like how you put it, the promise that we put out there for the world to see. Is that kind of what you're suggesting?
Yeah, that's exactly right. Your brand pitch has 3 components. Okay. So I call this sucker the brand trifecta. Now, let me be honest. These terms have been around for forever, but I consider it a trifecta because it's a formulaic approach. And I love formulas. And I spent the last decade studying buyer psychology and behavior science to understand what are the 3 things that somebody needs to know to actually give a crap about your product or service. And it started from my sales career. Seriously, that's where I figured this out. And it's just very simple. Number 1 is they need to know, tell me what you do. Tell me what you do. In fact, the first thing that somebody asks you when you walk into the room is what? Oh, what do you do?
Yeah.
What do you do? That's your tagline. I build brands that win more work. Well, interesting. A great tagline should answer what you do, and it should be provocative enough that gets somebody to go, really, what do you mean by that? Tell me more about, right? It's not pretentious.
How do you do that?
But provocative. Tell me more. Hold on. Tell me more about that, Kate. And so then the second thing that somebody wants to know as a follow-up you should tell them the next layer of detail, which is, oh, the value proposition statement, which really is saying, okay, what I mean by that is, here's the problem that I know you're experiencing. Here's how I solve that problem. Here's how I solve your problem. Now, here's what's interesting. The third and final piece of information that somebody needs to know are what we call differentiator statements, sometimes called your 3 uniques, right? But it's really asking the question, how are you different or better than the rest? Because if you think about it, in an average conversation, I tell you what I do, Brian. You're like, that's interesting. What do you mean? And I say, oh, well, what I mean is, here's how I can solve your problem. Other people have said that before. And so while you can give a great tagline and a great value proposition, which should be true and provocative and different, still people want to make sense of that. And they need to know, okay, let me make sure I'm tracking with you. How are you different and better than anybody else who's promised that to me? And so if you can answer those 3 things, you get somebody to the point of conversion. And the point of conversion is where they go, oh, that makes sense. Okay, so Kate, how does that work? Or what does that look like?
Now, so let's push back on this a little bit. So we talked about the what and the how, but what about the why? I'm told, Kate, that I need the why to do this. So how speak to that person?
Your why, as far as like, why do you do branding? Or are you saying, where does the why come into the conversation?
Where does the why come into the conversation?
Your why is in your value proposition statement. So think about it this way. Your value proposition statement is supposed to call out the pain that I'm experiencing deeply. Have you ever gone to somebody's website and you go, oh my gosh, they just read my mail? Like, how did they know, right? Have you ever felt that before? That is a phenomenal brand that did a really good job of, in the first few sentences, totally calling out your pain. And your pain is your why. So by speaking to your customer's pain, you're getting them at a point where they go, yeah, that's exactly why I care, because that's the pain I need solved. You can't just say, I deliver value. It's really about, here's the pain. And if you get this pain solved, what does that do for you and for your business?
Yeah. Now, curious thing is, depending on your tagline, well, let me ask it in the question instead of making this suggestion here. Your tagline, should you only have one tagline? Does that tagline need to be different per the persona if you truly understand the why each persona is going to take action? Or is that a unique tagline and then you need to switch up your value prop per that persona?
So that's a phenomenal question. You're asking me really, how do you build what we call kind of like a brand architecture? Okay, so if we think about a company, and let's say you come to me and you say, hey, Kate, here's what we've really understood. We've done the work of identifying our top few target audiences. Okay, good. And hey, we've also done the work of really figuring out that our CFO audience cares about this thing. They care about risk, right? And our CEOs care about growth, and right. And every audience has a little bit of different thing that, they want. Or you could say, Kate, segment 1, when we serve industrial groups, it's this. And when we serve B2B SaaS companies, they care about that. So it could be by sector, it could be by role. All right. Fine. If you find that ultimately the bottom level heart pain is totally different for each of those, then yes, what can happen with your brand architecture is you may find that you have a singular, what we call a singular tagline that says what you do as a company, but you may have separate pages on a website, let's say, with separate value proposition statements and differentiator statements that absolutely speak to each of those audiences. In fact, have you ever gone to a website before where they have a big, beautiful tagline, high-level value proposition statement, but then they go, great for marketing, sales, and finance. And if you were to click on each of those buttons, you go to a page and it speaks to their specific pain.
Right.
And what I like about the product or the service. That's beautiful marketing. That's a layered approach.
Now, you keep talking about heart pain. So I think I know what it is, but why don't we define what you mean by heart pain? Can you unpack that a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. When I talk about heart pain, I talk about, I guess in layman's terms, we're talking about the problems you really solve. And often what happens is if we say, hey, Kate, well, I'm a coach, I offer coaching services. I would go, great. Well, why does somebody care about having coaching? And you go, well, what do you mean by that? So here's what I want to say, Brian, is I think at a high level, we think we know the problems we solve for somebody, but to get to the heart pain requires a bit of root cause analysis, going a bit deeper beyond surface level what we solve, all the cool product features and benefits or service features and benefits, to actually go down and ask yourself altruistically, why does this person even care about getting this solved? Is it because they care about growth? Is it because they care about changing the world? Is it because they care about pursuing their dreams? Is it because what's going on here that's actually at the heart of what they deeply care about, of why they take action? Because
Yeah,
that's the emotive stuff that would drive them to pay.
and I like the words that you just used there, take action, right? Because a lot of times we go at this intellectually, and intellectual won't move them to act. And so diving down more deeply is critically key things. So on this brand trifecta, then, whenever we talk about your tagline, identifying the problem, pain, and then how do we solve it, that value prop, and then the differentiator, you seem to be pretty systematic in how you go about this. So is there a formulaic approach that you do for the tagline, or how you would suggest us to build out this tagline?
That's so great. So, you know how you said to me, all the flavors, marketing comes in a lot of flavors.
Yeah.
Okay, so taglines do come in flavors, don't they? They're like ice cream. It's so funny. And I talk about this in my book a little bit, because we see physical structures of taglines that can look and feel different, but there's some general principles that I'd love to kind of give you. So I think first and foremost, a great tagline is short. It's typically only 5 to 6 words. And I'll tell you, if your tagline has a semicolon or a period, that's not a tagline, that's a sentence, right? So maybe start there by shortening it.
Yeah.
But here's the thing, there's also some different varieties you might see in the world. One of them is, if you've ever seen like word period, word period, word period. That's a structure for a tagline. Sometimes you get a tagline that's like, do this, period, do this, period. Verb oriented, very action oriented, but it's like 2 words and 2 words. And then you get a standard just phrase that's an action phrase, building this, empowering this, accelerating this. But structurally, the goal is to have it short. It should be memorable, should be very provocative. It should really get to the bottom line of what's the overarching promise of what you're saying you're delivering. It should answer the question when you walk into the room, what do you do? We blank, we tagline.
Got it. Now, I've heard a couple of people, and this might be a little bit tactical, but oftentimes people say, well, what do you do? And then you lay out, and this, I don't think this would equate to a tagline, more along the lines of what you're talking about with that value prop, maybe, where you go into a bit of a story. Have you know how oftentimes you'll hear that, companies, they don't know how to do X, Y, or Z. They don't know how to hire salespeople. They can't get a hold of conversation. We help with that. So that's not necessarily a tagline, and it's a bit of a conversation starter. So how would you differentiate that tagline versus something along those lines that might tactically put you into a conversation?
All right. So really, this is great. So tactically, let me give you the flow of how this can work in an actual conversation, because I think everything that we've done with this brand trifecta is built off of conversation psychology, and it's buyer psychology. But essentially, I actually would want you to lead with your tagline first before you get into the story, because you want to give somebody something short enough and memorable enough where they want to ask the next question. Not every listener, not every person you talk to cares about story. What's interesting is some people are just like, get me to the point. And if you've ever heard of like DISC psychology or communications, not everybody's going to go, the moment you go, how, you've lost me. It's like, you've lost me. I don't care. You just lost credit with me. So what I want people to always do is to have that 5 or 6 words to answer, what do you do? We blank. Now, here's the great part is, if you give a really good tagline and I say, oh, I build brands that win more work, your response will be, really? So tell me more about that. Then I go, okay, well, here's the deal. I am a brand strategist, and I believe that business is a conversation and not a transaction. But here's the catch, Brian, is many businesses struggle to create conversations that convert. And you're like, yeah. And I go, all right, well, that's where I come in. My job is to help you build a brand message that's going to build that compelling and common ground with your audiences. So ultimately they buy from you versus the competition. So I gave a bit of a story there, Just like you talk about, you know how we do, you know, this, well, we help with that value prop. I just want you to move it down to the second step.
Yeah, and I like what you did there. So I believe you throw out the challenge, right? The throwing out there, that's the why, and then you throw out the challenge is here's what most people run into, and then here's where we can make you look like the hero. You sound very much, and some of what you're dropping here sounds very akin to why am I blanking on his name? But building your story brand, that guy Don. I forget his name, but anyway, it sounds very akin to that, where you're driving down and
Oh, you
allowing
broke
this
up there,
to.
Brian. Can you hear me?
Yep, you're frozen though. There you go. You're unfrozen. You back? Can you hear me?
Yes. Yes. Can we start over there? You say that my approach sounds like what?
Yeah. So James, you're going to have to hit this as well here to get this. So back into this. So Kate, based upon some of the things that you've been laying out here, your approach seems very akin to, I think his name is Don Miller.
Donald Miller.
Yeah, Miller, building your story brand, because a lot of this is very unique. He doesn't necessarily say that the three uniques. That more comes out of the entrepreneurial operating system and that in their marketing side. But it brings this all together, and it just seems like that story form is very much akin to that.
Well, here's where I'm going to challenge it. This is such a great question. So I think that there's a huge component that Donald Miller did brilliantly,
Okay.
which when Donald Miller brought out this idea of story brand, what he did that was so phenomenal is he really had us wake up and go, oh my gosh, why are we not putting the customer at the heart of this journey, in the heart of our story? Here's the thing though. I think we have to take it to the next level, because what happened was we all took this idea of storytelling and we ran with it in a very bad way. Okay. And so what I mean by that is we all took it. We're like, oh, I'm going to tell this complex story about how amazing we are. You know, if you've ever been on the other side of a story, it's boring sometimes. And it's a one-way monologue. And I'm a firm believer that we need to move away from pure storytelling branding to conversational branding. Conversational branding, the way that I teach with the brand trifecta, means that every layer from your tagline to your value proposition statement to your differentiators actually allows space or room for somebody to ask the next question, to respond. Now that's really interesting. You're not giving paragraph upon paragraph of copy, are you? You're giving room with these short sentences for somebody to go, what do you mean by that? Hold on, that's interesting. Wait a second, how are they different? Every step of the way, you're allowing somebody to buy in and self-select that they want to keep going in the conversation. And that's why, like, my book is called Muting the Megaphone, because as marketers, we get such a bad rap for what we call megaphone marketing, right? And if you've ever been on the other side of that, you're all like inundated with all of this stuff. You're like, overwhelmed. And I think we need to stop that. You need to stop telling stories and start having conversations.
So you're really suggesting that this is choose your own outcome, right? Choose your own ending as you're going through this, because depending on where you pause, and I've noticed this in your speech pattern too, is whenever we're talking, you'll put in long breaks that invite somebody to either ask another question or allow you to continue on. So I'm not sure if that's intentional or not. I'm guessing it is.
Yeah, it is. Meaning, if I just sat here and talked to you for an hour, you'd be like, that's fun, Kate. You know,
well, look at the time. Gotta go.
Yeah, right. Well, I think it is, that's certainly my style personally, but I think when I really went back and studied this, and my previous background, by the way, was in linguistic anthropology. And it was actually trying to study the understanding of how language shapes culture and what we experience in the world. And what we recognize even in the United States and in Western cultures and in Western way we use language is that people need room to respond. We are not actual storytellers like other cultures are, and that's actually okay. We are conversationalists at heart. And so by leaving these rooms and these breaks and these pauses, even if the way that I help people lay it out on their website, you're giving your audience the opportunity to choose their own path. Now, here's what's fascinating though. I, as an owner of a company, would much prefer that the wrong person self-selected out after reading my brand than going down a path and calling me and wasting my time. And I would much prefer that the right prospect sees that message, goes yes, and then connects with me so that I have a higher quality prospect that resonated with that and wants to come to the table.
Yeah, right. Because And that's the age-old problem, right? Between marketing and sales. Sales is saying you never give me any good leads, and marketing is saying you can't close any of the good leads that I give you. And oftentimes it's because you're getting somebody that's selling shoes, and you're trying to sell a multi-million-dollar ERP system to them, and that's not going to be a fit whatsoever. So
That's right.
wholly agree with that one. Okay, so in this in this tagline, so we're looking for it to be short, roughly 5 to 6 words, no commas or anything along those lines. Keep it at that 5th grade reading level kind of thing, right? We want it to be memorable, and then we want it to be provocative. Can you give me some sense of provocative? Because there's some people that are taking provocative and going like completely inappropriate versus provocative, meaning, well, you tell me what provocative you mean instead of me trying to fill in the blanks here.
When I really say provocative, what I mean is it doesn't have to be so flashy. Listen, if you are a fractional CFO, my friend, and you're listening to this today, do I need your tagline to be like super sexy? No, but it should beg the question, what do you mean by that? That's interesting. That's provocative. It provoke at its sense should get the other person to go, huh, okay, that's different. That's a little different. I like that. I had a SaaS implementation company. They implement Salesforce. Can you imagine if their tagline were implementing Salesforce? Wah, wah, right? Well, when we really unpacked the brand, what we recognized for this company is that it was for them, they were super passionate about helping companies scale. They were passionate about helping companies get to that next level. And they firmly believed that the work that they do is a critical component of scaling revenue operations. That's the work that they do. All right. So their tagline is scale with intention, win with precision. So do you see how the intentionality of what you do with building your systems equals the ability to really like be precise in the way that you win in the market? That was ultimately their tagline that we then tested. And sure enough, in A/B testing that out, they saw a much higher conversion rate with that, along with the rest of their branding on their website.
Yeah, because I was thinking with that CFO, instead of we help you manage your money, it would likely be, well, what do you do? Well, just off the top of my head, I would think it'd be something along the lines, we help you use your cash more efficiently, or something like that.
Could be speaking to bottom line. It could be eliminating risk. It could be, improving the bottom line. All of these things that when you really think about what a CFO does is so much more than just cash flow, isn't it?
Because
Right?
really what you're looking for them to do is invite them to the next question is, so how do you do that? Is what I think you would know you have a good tagline if the next thing is, well, how do you do that?
Yeah. Boom. And that's where your value proposition comes in. Tell me what you mean by that. What do you mean by that? Well, what I mean by that is, okay, here's what companies are facing, right? This is the truth. And you're like, yes, yep, I totally get that. Okay, so my job is to help you solve that. And how I do that is this.
Which goes into the absolute key requirement that you know your personas. If you don't truly intimately know what they're facing, and
That's right.
especially things are changing right now. I mean, as we're facing this, potential recession coming up, or likelihood of almost 100% what they're saying over the next 2 years that we're going to be facing this, things are going to change. And if you don't speak to that change and adapt that to today's market, it's going to get missed completely.
That's right.
And you're going to find a fall off.
I agree. And I think as we understand that when we have a last recession, what was the first thing to get cut? Marketing, right? So, but here
It depends who you talk to, right?
Yeah, it depends
everyone
who
you talk to, everyone, whatever you're selling, oh, that was the first thing that got cut. Training, that was the first thing. Marketing got that, right? So, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, it's true. But what's interesting in the recession? This is how my career got started. I took a job out of pure necessity. I left academia and I took a sales job to cold call IT professionals and sell them $2,500 training classes. That is literally the dumbest job that you could take, right? Because IT people clearly love to be called and they clearly love to be sold to. All right. So I take this job, no sales experience. And that was where I actually fell upon this whole recognition that all these complex sales scripts were not working, right? And I was like, whoa, hold on. There's got to be a different way to keep these people on the phone with me.
Yeah.
And I actually had to experiment. And that is where I truly experimented and came up with the Brand Trifecta. But here's what's fascinating is when we think about recessions and what's happening for business and small business today and what could be coming down the pipeline, not everybody's going to have a $5,000 a month marketing budget. Like, let's just call it out. But let me tell you, my friend, if you have the ability to show up in a Zoom room or go shake hands with somebody or be at the Chamber of Commerce event or do that kind of work, have your brand pitch down, because it's the one thing that actually enables you to sell smartly and get more of the right prospect to the table. And that's ultimately what we're trying to do, is get more prospects of the right kind to the table.
Right. And because otherwise it's just a waste of time, because your most valuable commodity is your time, because that's your limiting constraint. No matter what it is, it's how many conversations can you have? How many meetings can you have from a sales perspective? However, that's it. I don't care how much technology you throw at it. It's going to be at the top of the funnel, allow you to have maybe those more conversations more quickly. But that's the limiting constraint, is having those conversations. So if you had the right conversation with the wrong person, that's likely worse than having the wrong no conversation with the right person, because at least that doesn't suck up your time, that you can do things to get in front of that right person.
That's right. And it's interesting because I always get asked, well, okay, Kate, this sounds great conceptually, but like, what are the metrics that are impacted by your brand, right? Because I think if we really talk about ROI, you're going to go write your brand, you hire a copywriter, you're like, cool, we're going to get this nailed down because we're trying to speak to everybody. All right, let's say you go do that work. What should you see impacted?
Yeah.
You should see three things. Number one, increased number of qualified prospects, right? The right kind of buyer that you would want to talk to come to the table.
Now, let me pause you there. MQL, SQL, SAL, where are we at in that metric that you're looking at?
I mean, gosh, I don't even know if we need to get that granular, to be super blunt with you.
Yeah.
Like, do we even need to get that granular? Like,
Well, it depends on what you're looking for and how complex of an
yeah,
organization they are.
I mean, let me try and answer it at a high level, because I have heard people throw what I'm going to show you into every category under the sun. All right. So like, however an organization wants to track, that's up to them. But what I would say is, number one, increase number of qualified prospects that come to the table. You define what ideal looks like. You have more of those people coming and having a conversation with you. Number two, you should see an increased close rate. Obviously, right?
Right.
Here's the third most fascinating one though. Decrease in sales cycle time.
I was going to say you should see that, because if you're nailing the right person, identifying the real problem, they're going to move through the process more quickly because they want it to get solved. So I'd wholly agree with that one.
Yeah, honestly, like I guess what I would suggest is that that's one that you should be keeping out a real eye out for if you're in any sort of B2B space, by the way. So if there is a proposal in your process and they're not just clicking a button to purchase, the number one thing that I see that blows people's minds is they go, whoa, we went from having to have like 2 to 3 meetings to getting a proposal at the door to 1 meeting and a proposal and a faster close time. Yeah, because you delivered a pitch in the Zoom room to the guy and he's like, oh my God, we should totally get me and Bob on the call and let's talk about this. And so if they hold that meeting, they're going to go stalk your website before they show up and they'll see the same message and go, yeah, oh yeah. And if they get on that call with you, they're no longer asking, what do you do? They're beyond that now. They're saying, well, we know what you do and here's what we're dealing with in our company. And can you fix this specific thing for us? How much further down the pipeline are they?
And you're already differentiated because no one else is doing that.
Bingo.
And this is where, especially as we move into this tightening market, the salesperson is going to be your differentiator, because to be a value seller, to sell in a consultative way, you have to be able to do these things. And if you can't differentiate yourself, if you cannot alter their pathway, because only 3% are ready to purchase today, maybe 7% or so are looking at this currently, the vast majority, that other 90%, did not wake up today going, oh my gosh, you know what I need today?
Right.
What you're selling. And it just doesn't happen. So if you don't differentiate yourself, and if you don't go out and get budget where there isn't any, that's where you're going to fall flat, especially today.
That's right. And when you ask me, Kate, are what you talking about, MQLs, SQLs, all of it. Like, I have to just be really blunt with you here. Brand is one of the biggest things that creates alignment between your sales and your marketing arms of your organization. And we begin to start to see less delineation between how we qualify these metrics and come up with these metrics. And they're no longer siloed, but you begin to see that, oh my God, we're going for the same thing. This is how we're both defining ideal. And sales goes, yes, that is exactly who we want to be talking to, because we're closing those people faster. Marketing goes, beautiful, let me target that specific person because I've got psychographics and demographics and I understand how to take that same message that you're using in the conversation over here and push that out over digital. I just want us to get our arms around the fact that brand really creates synergy among your sales and your marketing operations.
Well, it does. So a couple of things out of this, right? Because what you're saying here, Kate, you from a branding and marketing side of this is what RevOps is screaming. I think we're all finally saying the same thing, and it feels like we're all screaming to the air whenever we're all saying the same thing, and we just need to come together and talk through this. And a couple of things that you're pointing out, if everybody has the same elevator pitch or that branding message, that tagline with that value prop underneath it, and everyone's tested on it, that they can actually do it, that's going to have that alignment throughout the organization.
That's
so
right.
whether it's the person pushing the broom to the person who is at the very top of the food chain, that CEO,
Yep.
give the title, everyone in between there should all be able to say that tagline in the value prop. And if they're not,
Every time.
yeah, you're doing something wrong. You're not training them up. They don't have a belief in what you do. Everyone should be your salesperson, especially what we're going to be facing here.
Oh my gosh, thank you. I completely agree. And it's interesting, when I work with companies, I have a couple rules and principles of when I do this work. Number one is I never take a project unless the founder or the CEO is in the room.
Right.
Ever. So if you're listening to this, you're like, well, our CMO can take care of that. Nope. Nope. Hold on. Because you know what happens? I had a CMO one time, huge company, huge project, we built the most amazing brand. And I get a call 2 months later and she's like, he trashed the whole thing. And I told her at the beginning, I was like, I don't like to do this. I'm willing to do this with you because I know you've known you for 10 years, but trashed the whole thing. See, the thing is that whether we like it or not, the leaders of our organization, especially founders and CEOs, hold the keys to the brand. That being said, a founder can't write a brand in a box. You need to do, the second principle is you better have sales and marketing and operations represented in that room.
Yeah.
All three with your founder, all of those in that room, because I can guarantee you that when that happens, you're all are going like, breakthrough. We're saying the same thing. Hallelujah.
Which then makes customer success a world easier, because now you're not, customer success isn't cleaning up for the promise that marketing made that we can't deliver, or what sales is sold that we can't deliver. And then now customer service is asked to clean up the mess, and they're getting all the grief, turning out alcoholics for what poor marketing and sales have done to them.
That's hysterical. Oh my God. Yeah. Your poor development team behind the scenes is just coding in a basement. Go send me another requirement, because nobody knows what they want anymore in this thing,
Yeah. Oh my gosh. But no one's ever heard of that before.
That's so funny. Yeah. I really think at the end of the day, your brand's job is to be your path of least resistance to revenue. It's absolutely going to be that for you if you recognize as well that least resistance not only means least resistance for your prospects, but least resistance internally among people in the organization that actually are trying to achieve the same goals.
Yeah, because we talk about the customer's journey. And I think too often we always we can tend to look internally or external customer. In reality, it's the customer. We have to look at both of them. How can we make it easier internally to be in alignment, to make sure it goes through the whole entire process more easily, as well as externally, de-friction the whole entire purchasing process. And by the way, doesn't that start with, oh, I actually understand what in the world you do? I mean, how many times have we gone onto a website to try to figure out what they do, and you leave more confused than whenever you showed up, because you're like, what are you even talking about? So,
oh my gosh, yes.
Yeah.
It's amazing when you have your brand built the right way, where all of a sudden you realize, wait, why are we doing this demo process? Or why is it so complex? Why is it an hour demo when it could be a 20-minute demo with Q&A? Like we overthink things so often. What we realize is we create these redundant, exhaustive processes where we lose prospects along the way because we didn't do a good enough job on the front end of really asking their core questions. We created confusion in our content. And it's amazing to me that when you start cutting through that noise a little bit, and again, you move away from megaphone marketing with so much information, and you just give people what they want, they'll ask for the next layer of detail when they're ready. They'll go to your product page and look at all the cool charts and features and benefits, but don't put that front and center on the homepage of your website, confusing the crap out of them. This is an order of operation of what people need to know when. Allow them space to ask the question and seek out that next layer of information.
100%. All right. So now this is going to be a stupid question, but
No.
it's a true question. How do you help companies ID the problem that they solve? Because so often they don't understand the real problem they solve.
Okay, so there's a very simple exercise that I use. This is actually what's really fun. So of course I come to the table and I come in blind. I actually, even though I stalked you and we had this whole conversation about what you do, I would come in blind to this whole room and I would say, tell me what you do. What problem do you solve? Now, you tell me all the cool things and I listen and I take copious notes, and that's lovely. But we have assumptions here, right? We have assumptions on the problem that we solve. All of us do. So the way to get around our assumptions and actually do a bit of a litmus test to see if we're spot on is a simple exercise called the 5 whys. Have you ever heard of this before?
I have, yes. Why don't you dive down? Yeah, dive down and explain it for
This is
others.
a simple root cause analysis exercise. Part of my background was doing lean training and lean certification. And in the process of learning lean and basic process improvement, we realized, wait a second, in order to make sure we actually know what's going wrong, we need to ask why more than once. So the question that I ask people to start with is, all right, knowing this particular target audience, and you would do this exercise for each of your audiences. Say, let's say target audience A. Okay, when it comes to your products and services, Brian, what's the bottom line need that they have? And you could say, Kate, they need a service that does this for them. And I would go, great, why? Why do they care about that? Well, because of this. Great, well, why do they care about that? So by asking why, what happens is all of a sudden we realize there's a deeper, remember that altruistic, that heart level that's actually driving their decision making. It could be fear, it could be hope, it could be excitement. That's the stuff we have to tap into. Because that's actually what's going on in their psyche about why they even care to have it fixed.
Yeah, and notice what Katie didn't say. Katie did not say to make you more efficient, to save you time, to save you money. That is not the case, and do not bail at that level, because that's what they're going to want to jump to. Oh, because it saves them time. Oh, it saves them money. Or, oh, it makes them more efficient. Don't do that, because that is a baseline, what everybody else is saying. Get to what Kate was saying, that emotional compelling reason of why somebody's going to change their actions or their behaviors.
Yeah, I could tell you that branding is all about language, right? Talking to your prospects. But I come out guns blazing with my tagline and say it's a brand that builds, it's a brand that's going to win more work. I tell you that branding is about creating conversations that convert. I talk about brand being a path of least resistance to revenue. That's actually what's going on for people that want to make a branding choice with me. So I have to hit that hard. Now, the way we do it, the how we do it is this collaborative approach, and we write all these things, and here's how it's worked. But that's later. That's later. What ultimately you have to ask is, why does somebody really care about having this problem solved for their business? What's really driving them? It's like a Maslow's hierarchy of needs in the world of business.
Yep. And it's universal. I mean, it really is. So whether you call it that branding, whether you call that right messaging, whether you call that whatever, you need these key fundamentals. Get a tagline to engage them quickly and help them to identify the problems that you solve. If they have that problem, great, you're going to have a conversation. If they don't have that problem, great, you've just saved yourself an immense amount of time and grief and headaches.
That's true. There is a serious principle here about let them go.
Yes.
When we actually define what's so funny, I love charts and graphs more than most people. I don't know if you do, but I love charts. I like my checklists. Okay, so funny was when I trained sales teams on branding, and we come out the other side with the language that goes on the website. Well, we turn that into actual conversation pitches with their bullets of what they say on a call. The other thing that we do, though, is when we define what the ideal buyer looks like, we have charts that we build of 20 to 30 buyer criteria of what does ideal look like. And we're not just talking demographics, my friend, we're talking psychographics. Where does this person eat, shop, what kind of clothes they wear? You know, for a SaaS company, your ideal audience is a SDR. I want to know, is this an SDR that's a senior SDR that's wearing a Rolex watch or an Omega because he earned that bonus check and he has his first flashy car? Like, who is this person? Who's buying from you today? What's driving him? Is this about ego and being the best? Is this about saving the company and saving the world? So by defining how detailed you understand the psyche of this person, you can then answer the question of what's really driving them to make a buying decision. And it's neither right nor wrong. Your job with that buyer criteria list too is if you get on a phone with somebody and you're going, They only have half this list. Let them go. They are not a qualified prospect. God bless them, but they're not right for you. But if they have 2/3 or 3/4 of that list, I can guarantee you they're going to take a next step.
Got it. So pithy, short, memorable, provocative taglines, value prop that identifies the real problem that that person is going to have, and then in like super bullet point fashion, so we can keep moving on here for you. Differentiator. How do you best suggest that we work to differentiate ourselves?
Yeah, differentiators. Obviously, you can get at the big things that Brian that we would talk about, such as speed, could be affordability or cost or investment point. Things that also differentiate you that are often overlooked, though, is like your approach. So if you have a very interesting, proven approach, you have a playbook that you deliver. Maybe there's this particular outcome that they get that's very different between you and the competition. See, that's something that's very tangible. Someone's like, oh, I love that. Maybe you have a total different proven process that you actually take people through that ensures you get the right outcomes. That is a differentiator. I want you to think beyond just like speed to market or speed of the process and maybe affordability and actually inefficiency, and actually look at your approach. Often that's where there's some different differentiators that pop up that are really interesting that you can pull through.
Yeah, so if you can identify as a differentiator how you reduce risk, how do you increase the time to that strategic initiative being solved,
Yeah.
and or how do you improve that customer journey? If you can couch it in terms of those, as opposed to save you time and money, you're going to be way better ahead.
I think so too. I think also just recognize like, listen, if everybody else is saying that, does that really differentiate you? Our team is so amazing. So is everybody's team.
Yeah.
Now, that being said, if your team has a whole buttload of certifications, excuse my language, and they're like above the rest, show it. Show me.
Yeah, because
Put
here's
the
what
logos out
nobody's
there,
yeah,
right?
here's what nobody out there is doing. They're not going, hey, you know what? We're the cheapest out there because that's the only way we can schlep this crap, right? No one's saying that. So you really have to make sure that you're doing and showing that you are different. Well, with that said, let's dive down into some rapid fires here. What are the biggest challenges or mistakes you see companies making whenever they say, oh my gosh, I need to start going, I need to go down this branding path? What is the biggest challenge, mistake that you see companies making whenever they try to change to this approach?
Okay, there's two things. Number one, you are too worried about your competition and trying to sound or be like them. I want you to seriously remember that you need to know yourself. You have to. I know you know your competition and what they're saying, but if they're orange, you better be blue. Okay, so here's the thing. You should not be sounding like your competition. You should be sounding like you. You should be stating how you're different. And so if you try so hard to be like them, you just shot yourself in the foot, and nobody's going to notice you. They're just going to continue to notice your competition. Seriously. The second thing that I think is really important to remember is, again, stop trying to talk to everybody. Focus in on who you really think is the best customer for you, who has the best probability of buying, and market to them, message to them. And you will see an impact in your revenue if you really do a good job speaking to that one or two or three groups.
Yeah, and that's the hardest thing to do because you think that there's safety in the quantity.
Yes, of course.
And there isn't. There's
No.
dilution and confusion. So yeah, that's a hard one. Now, how about best suggestions on how we can start doing this, whether it's from hiring talent to be able to execute against this, or driving sales utilizing this, or scaling of the business? What's one suggestion that you would give us in around that?
Oh, you just went on mute there, Brian. Can you repeat that question? Because it actually brought you on mute.
Yeah, sure. So in terms of best suggestions that you would have, whether a business hack for hiring sales talent that could execute against this, or maybe even the marketing talent to be able to perform this, the sales practice of being able to implement this, or scaling of the business through this. So what's a suggestion that you'd have?
You know what? I think the most overlooked but practical suggestion is when you're at a point where you're like, yeah, we want to write this. I think you actually need to hire a copywriter, somebody who writes for a living, bring them in. And the reason that I say that is writing is part art and part science. And so I just think it's important to remember the tendency for us is if we start, we're going to write these very verbose, corporate-y sounding sentences. And so this is where a writer can help you. They're going to really be there to gut check with you and say, is it really spot on with your tone of voice? How do we tighten that and shorten that? How do we make sure that this is layered in the right way so it's punchy and it's provocative? It is so worth your time to bring in a partner that has an outside set of eyes and writes for a living.
Now, would this be an organization, a firm like yours, or would this be a internal hire, or would this be somebody like on an Upwork, on a contractual basis? How are you suggesting that?
Well, I would suggest whether you hire somebody like myself or an agency or an independent contractor, the basic principles that I would want to see though is that this is all they do. They're a writer first and foremost. Do not find a jack of all trades. Find somebody that writes branding and messaging for a living. And I don't necessarily think you need to have this as an internal hire unless you said to me, Kate, part of our brand approach is to build a content marketing strategy where we are systematically going to be sending out tons of emails, building white papers, doing all these things, in which then it might be more cost effective for you and smarter to have somebody in-house.
What are maybe some different resources that you might recommend? Books, podcasts, guides, so we can be as smart about branding as you here, Kate.
I love it. Okay, so I definitely think that there are some great books out there. You certainly could start with Donald Miller's Story Brand book. If you love that, you can get it on audiobook. There's all sorts of formulas out there. Of course, I'm going to say pick up my book if you'd like, which is coming out in July of 2022, if you actually want to know how to write this as well from this approach.
And drop that name again. What's the name of the book?
Muting the Megaphone. It's going to teach you how to stop telling stories and start having conversations with your brand. I would say that in terms of podcasts, in terms of marketing podcasts, the Rainmaking podcast is an excellent one on all things business and branding. That's a great one. There's a whole host of them that I would say, Brian, and I'm happy to send you actually a list of them if you'd like that you could put in the show notes.
Sure. It sounds wonderful. So cool. All right. Now, what do you see the future holding? What trends have you going, oh, like you're scared to death, or yeah, let's go? What do you see coming down the pike?
Can I tell you, I'm so excited to see us move away from sales funnels. Listen, I understand the idea and the concept of giving people offers and different things along the way. Great. Love that. But I think the idea of these long sales funnel pages, remember that when that came out?
Okay.
That's starting to go away, and people are getting back to short, to the point, single next step for somebody. Don't overwhelm, don't confuse. Stop creating this megaphone marketing and just get to the point of what that next step is for somebody. That's actually what we're seeing. I think these next generations, and there's been a number of studies on this, are seriously craving conversation with companies from which they purchase. So that even looks like why you see more companies are now using chat, text. Okay. This is the movement that we have to start catching on to. Stop just throwing stuff at people. Allow them ways with your messaging and with the interaction on digitally and face-to-face to actually have a conversation with you.
Interesting. How much would you see AI integrating with that from a chat function versus a human?
We see a blend right now. I actually think that we will see more people behind it again, which is good. Listen, AI has a great place. The ones that I love the most is they start you off with AI and then they realize the AI is like, oh, I'm going to send you to somebody. And then boom, I get sent to somebody if I need it.
Okay.
WP Engine is phenomenal at this, actually. So I had a question on hosting on my website. That's what they did. It started with the robot. And then the robot goes, it seems like I can't solve your problem. Let me quickly get you to somebody. They put me on live chat with a real person and I got it answered and I had a follow-up email and away I went. It was awesome.
That's actually not a bad idea because you don't mind dealing with a chat bot if they can help you, but as soon as
totally. So it was a great blend for them. And then they realized by using a blend, we could maybe solve half of our audience's problems with the chat, with the bot. And then the other half, yeah, absolutely. Let's move them over to somebody.
Yeah, and I think people appreciate that because you get speed and resolution. So a best of both worlds. Well, cool. Well, hey, Kate, who should reach out to you? How should they do it? And why should people reach out to you?
All right. If you're listening today, first and foremost, and you have questions on branding and you'd love to chat about it, please find me on LinkedIn. I do love hearing from people. If you follow Brian and listen to this podcast, feel free to connect with me, Kate DiLeo. I'm on LinkedIn. Secondly, if you are in a position where you are feeling stuck and you're not sure how to get help to write your brand, there's two things that I'd recommend. Number one, check out my website. You can certainly purchase a copy of the book to try this on your own. And I hope that helps you. And that is katedileo.com. And if you're really feeling like, wow, we need some additional support and bring me in to help you actually knock this out, feel free to reach out to me.
Cool. Very, very much appreciate it. Well, hey, thanks so much. We pushed through the technological
Thank you.
details. We
Yes.
pushed through it Monday and my mouth wasn't working today. My gosh, but a lot of good stuff here. Really appreciate it. So make sure that we're using the trifecta, where we're getting what you do, your tagline, the value prop, ID that problem, and then in a pithy way, make sure they understand how you're going to solve it for them, and then leverage your differentiators. Let's help communities thrive through entrepreneurship, and that's going to come from branding, good sales, and talented people to execute on that. So thank you so much, Kate. I really appreciate it.
Thanks, Brian.
All right. So if you like this episode, share it. Give us a thumbs up. Give us some good ratings. That really helps us. So we really appreciate you doing that. And remember, knowledge for knowledge's sake is pointless. Let's go knowledge for application out there. Make it happen. Thanks, everyone. See you.